So the other day I was chatting with a friend of mine and he was invited to be on a panel to talk about like what are the things that VCs look for when evaluating a startup. And so we were just talking back and forth and on different things that he could talk about. And I was like, the things I look for really boil down to roughly like 4 things. I look for companies that are scalable. I look for companies that are defensible. I look for management teams that are able to execute, and I look for products that they have a lot of demand. They're solving a real pain point. And so I thought maybe it'd be helpful to talk about that in this video and share what I mean by those different things to help you as you're looking at potential investments that you want to make, whether it's investments of your money into a company or investments of your time as a founder. What are the things that VCs are thinking about, at least at a very, very high level? So the first thing I want to talk about is strong demand. And to me, if you're not solving a real pain point for customers, then you're going to really just struggle to build a great business. And so, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people have great ideas. They're like, oh, if only this existed, my life would be incrementally better. But it turns out that ideas, good ideas, are actually really challenging to come up with, especially if they're, unique in any sort of way. And I think the reason for that is because there are a lot of people that have ideas, but most ideas, frankly, are not very good. And there are very few people that can come up with innovative ideas where they're taking the intersection of 2 disparate things, combining them into something that's truly new and innovative, that solves a problem for somebody that hasn't been solved before, right? And so I think that's step 1. Are you solving a real pain point for people that they would pay anything to get that problem solved for them, right? And then even if you do find a pain point that's really, really big and meaningful to people, you need to be able to solve that pain point for a lot of people, right? You need to have a huge market of people that solve that feel this pain point and are looking to have it solved, ideally. Or at a minimum, you have to solve a pain point that's so painful, people will pay anything to get it solved, right? A lot of people always reference insulin is a good example of this. You don't get it, you die, right? People are willing to pay a lot of money for things like insulin because of that, right? And so, you want to look for similar type things where it's if you don't get it, you die, right? And by the way, it doesn't always have to be life and death. There are great companies like Spotify that exist that are entertainment. But, if you think about it, the solution that they're providing is hey, we make it really easy to consume music that is part of everybody's life for the most part, right? And that people really resonate with and everything else. And it's wow, you just take down so many barriers and that solves such a huge pain point for people that they latch on and they'll pay, whatever to get access to those types of platforms. All right, the next one I want to talk about is, let's say you check that box on strong demand. People are banging down your door trying to buy your product. Awesome. That's not really enough, right? If I'm a doctor, I'm in high demand in my neighborhood, right? Because everybody that has a health issue, they need help and they will come to me and I'll have a lot of demand, but I'm just one person, right? I'm not very scalable. And scalability is the next thing I really look for. I want to invest in companies that have the ability to grow revenue much, much faster than their costs. So for example, if we think about my doctor example, if I'm just one doctor, if I want to treat more people, I have to give up more hours in my day. And eventually I'll run out of hours in my day, right? That I can help people and get paid for that. So then what do? Well, maybe I go hire another doctor. But now I'm limited by that doctor's number of hours in a given day, and so on and so forth. And so every time I want to treat another patient, right, I'm paying out more money in terms of time or salary or what have you, right? The business is just not that scalable at the end of the day. What kind of businesses are really scalable? Well, software is very scalable, right? I write the software once, and then every time I sell that software to somebody else, I already wrote it once. I can just give them a copy, effectively, right, of that software that I already wrote. That is the beauty of a scalable business, is that it costs a lot of money to create the initial product, but once that's created, it doesn't cost that much money for each incremental user to get benefit from that product. And as a VC, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to invest a relatively small amount of money into the company with the hopes that it will grow super fast because it's a very scalable business, and grow and become really, really big in a relatively short time period. And if you don't have a scalable business, you'll constantly have to be raising more and more and more and more money. And it'll be just really challenging to generate like a very strong, large business. And it also won't be one that's super profitable, because that's the other part. The more profitable the business is, the more other investors are going to be willing to pay for it, the more valuable it is, and the more of a return that you can generate on your investment as a VC. I mean, if you think about like some of the greatest tech companies out there, go look at how much in profits they generate. I mean, it's like billions and billions of dollars in profits because they have very, very scalable business models. The next piece is defensibility. Now, if you've got a scalable business and you're solving a real pain point for people, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a venture-worthy company. For example, let's say you have a media business, which I get the irony, right? But let's say you have a media business. It used to be that, you know, you had decent defensibility around your media business, right? There are only like so many channels on the TV and, you know, so many people that bought airwave rights and all that stuff. But today in the internet world, like anybody can create content and push it out on the internet, right? And so content's one of those things that's hyper scalable, right? I'm making this video one time and then theoretically millions of people could watch this one video, right? Super scalable. And I could create a video that has like really important information that people are desperate to know, right? And so it solves a big pain point, but it's not super defensible, right? Somebody else could come in and they could look at my content and they could basically rip it off, or they could provide, you know, content that's similar or whatever it might be, right? And flood the internet with more content like that. It's just really hard for it to be defensible. And like big brands spend tons of money, like Disney spends tons of money trying to defend their brand and their content from other people using it, because they understand like how easy it is for other companies to come in and compete with them by ripping off their content. So at the end of the day, the next pillar that really matters is defensibility. Do you have something that's not only solving a big pain point and scalable, but is hard for other people to replicate? And really, defensibility boils down to two main areas. The first one is, do you have the ability to keep other companies from copying your cost structure? And the other is, do you have the ability to keep other companies from accessing your customers? If you can do both, you end up building massive, massive businesses. So let's talk about Facebook as a good example of this. On the one hand, Facebook is successful today because everybody's on Facebook. And so everybody has to be on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever it might be, right? It makes it really hard for a new startup to come in and convince people that they have as much value on their platform as Facebook does, because everybody's on Facebook and they're already putting all of the content and relationships and everything else into Facebook, right? And so it can be really challenging for an upstart to try to compete with that, right? Facebook's done a good job of blocking others from getting access to Facebook's core customers, right? Or users. But the other piece is also true, which is, if I want to build the next Facebook, how expensive would it be for me to set up a business that's able to provide the same level of value as Facebook does? Facebook ultimately doesn't sell to its users, it sells to advertisers. It basically uses our data that we give it for free, takes that data and sells it to advertisers. And so if you think about a competitor, like if I'm going to set up a competing business to Facebook, right? To get the same level of data on the customers, I would have to pay customers a lot of money to convince them to give me that data that I could then resell onto advertisers. And Facebook, the beauty of Facebook is they pay like nothing, right? For us to give them our content or our information and our data essentially for free. And so Facebook has both of these things. They have an extremely low cost structure that's really hard for other people to replicate. And simultaneously, they offer a tremendous amount of value to both advertisers and users, because everybody's on that platform and everybody's disclosed a ton of information. And so it's also really challenging for other competitors to attract the customers and users that Facebook already has. So that's what you're really looking for with defensibility. There are a lot of ways to build out those two types of things. I think Facebook is a good example because they really leverage network effects, which I think are one of the strongest areas of creating defensibility. But there are lots of other ways, right? Economies of scale, unique access to inputs, unique access to like properties and location and so forth can create defensibility. Like there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. But having some way that you can meaningfully demonstrate that like your product is unique on its cost structure or unique on its marketing effectively is a key tenet and a key thing most VCs are going to look for. And if you don't have it today, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got a very strong pathway to getting to that point as the business grows and continues to dominate. The last one is strong execution. So you usually hear from VCs that like the number one thing they look for is a strong team. And that's definitely true because even if you're solving a huge pain point for customers, you have a scalable business model that's highly defensible. If you don't have the people to actually operate the business, then it's still not going to end up being successful. And like venture capital has graveyards full of companies that were a great idea and just poorly executed and fell apart. The last thing I want to say is if you're a founder, maybe you're looking at these 4 things and you're like, I'm a good operator, but I don't have the other 3 things, right? Or maybe I'm just not like an amazing operator, but I'm good, right? But my business isn't really that scalable, right? You're a doctor, right? You're smart, but you don't have a super scalable business. Does that mean that you're going to be a failure? Not at all. The reality is that venture capital makes up, like 2 to 3% of all businesses out there. And there are a lot of businesses that were started with very little upfront capital and never raised a lot of money from VCs and went on to build very, very big, successful companies. The point of mentioning these 4 things is that these are the 4 things that VCs are looking for. And so if you don't have one of them, then it means that you're probably not a good fit for raising venture capital money, and you should look for finding resources in other ways. The reality is you can build a very successful business and do very well in life without having to raise venture capital. Like I said, less than like 3% of companies raise venture capital, and the reality is probably like less than 2% should raise venture money. So if you don't have all 4 of these things, don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. Just execute on your business. But if you really want to go down that venture path and you want to grow fast and dominate, then make sure that you're checking these 4 boxes and be able to explain and understand why they are compelling from the VC mindset. Hopefully this was helpful. Check out my other video where I talk about how to prepare for a venture capital interview, where frankly, you're going to want to be able to understand and articulate a lot of these same things to the person interviewing you. Thanks.